Hello, we are Group 4, consisting of 3 members, Samuel Ortega Gonzalez, Andrew Cartman, and Kyler Schneibly. For our semester project, we decided to make a web game called Dungeon and Die. In this game, you and potentially 2 to 3 other players must attempt to escape a dungeon that is filled with numerous challenges, being minigames. Let's go into the architecture of our project, starting with the front end.
Some components used in our frontend are axios for HTTPS calls, Material UI for its box, button, and modal elements, which provide very professional looking layouts. React is a huge one that gives us the hooks, use effect, and use state that make the interface feel really interactive and responsive. For some of our minigames, we do use HTML canvas, but they are wrapped in a React component so we can display them inside of a modal. Now onto the backend.
Starting off with the backend of our project, we use Koa, which aids our server API to make calls from the interface to our database. MySQL database. This plays a crucial role for our backend stuff like high scores, where our SQL database keeps track of the overall high scores achieved in the game. Trivia. Believe it or not, trivia functions under the SQL database, where it's used to find a random trivia question with answers based on a number like, say, 1 through 10. And lastly, player information, which is stored on the front end and passed into our database at the end of each game. That way, we can get our high scores. Overall, this project focused heavily on the front end aspect. Why don't we take a look at the interaction of our components?
This diagram should give you a good idea of how our different components interact with one another. On the left, we have the player with information like position, class, health, and score. Next to that, we have the board, which will display an image of the character or a different combination of characters if they're on the same cell. On the far right, we have the minigames, which will decrease the player health if they've lost a minigame, or increase their score if they've won a minigame. In the game state, we will have the board information, a list of players, the current player, whose turn it is, and the current number of players for this game instance, along with whether or not we've actually started or finished a game. Once the game is finished, it will pull the information out of the player list and update the high score table in the database.
So going into the demo, you start with the login screen, in which typing your name over a class will make that class playable for the board. So on the left side, you can see that our current HP is 4, and we have no special abilities. We all start at 0 with a score of 0. So before we move, we must play our first minigame, which will be Breakout. So Breakout is the iconic game where you got to break all the blocks at the top to win the minigame. How it works is it's an HTML canvas that refreshes every 10 milliseconds to give the illusion that the ball is moving. The ball's speed will be determined by the difficulty of the minigame. But we lose this minigame and go on to the thief's turn, in which he'll play Dragonflight.
In Dragonflight, the difficulty determines the speed of the game. You hold down the left mouse button to raise the dragon and do nothing to lower it. You win the game if you reach the end without hitting any obstacles along the way.
Winning a minigame will give us 100 points to our score, and as the thief we can use the plunder ability to get a random power-up, and using this will make it our active power-up. If we had done this before winning a minigame, we would have had 100 more points. In Goblin Slayer, a random number of goblins and frogs will appear in different locations. You must click on all of the goblins within 3 seconds while avoiding the frogs. We'll lose this game, so we're able to show off the cleric's heal ability. This cooldown is longer than the thief's to make them actually be able to die.
In trivia, you're given 10 seconds to read the game-related question from the database and click on the right answer to win.
So as you can see, the thief won and he got an extra 100 points because he had the boost score power-up, leading to a total of 200 points. We'll now use this new boost score power-up we got to boost our score for the next minigame if we win. Moving on is the next minigame called Treasure Hunt. It's a memory match game in which you must match 2 cards with each other and get all of them right to win. How it works is you select one card and it stays up until you pick the next card, from which then it'll do a comparison. The difficulty will determine the amount of mistakes you're allowed to make.
So our classes are Rogue with 4 hit points, an 8-sided die, and no ability. The Thief has 6 HP, a 6-sided die, and the Plunder ability, which gives them a random power-up once every 3 turns. The cleric also has 6 HP, a 6-sided die, and a heal ability which they can use to restore 1 HP every 5 turns. The tank has 8 HP, a 5-sided die, and no ability.
So now, our next minigame is Odd One Out. Like Breakout, it refreshes the canvas every 1 second, and erases all the shapes on the screen and draws up new ones. You have to click the circle to win, and the difficulty will determine how many shapes get in your way.
Let's talk about the power-ups. Restore health while restore 1 hit point. Boost score gives you 100 points if you pass that minigame. Boost movement will give you +3 to your roll value. And win a minigame will help you skip a minigame. They were designed in a way that kind of lets you only hold 1 at once, but if you play them smart, you can combine them in different ways. So here we're at the end of the game, and you can see that the rogue is only a couple of spaces away from escaping the dungeon. So we're going to go ahead and play our last minigame. And with that, we have a score of 1,600. Going to roll the last die to escape the dungeon, and let's fast forward to the last player in the dungeon. Here we have the tank, and they're going to play their last minigame, Goblin Slayer. Didn't quite make it out though. Very last one. That's okay. And everyone has escaped. So we can go ahead and click this reset button to go back to the main start menu. Let's check out the high scores.
At the end of every match, the score of every player is added to the high score table that exists in the database. It uses a MySQL query that exists at the backend. The score will be viewable in the high score table at the instant the game ends.
Well, thank you guys for watching. That was the end of our demo and the end of our presentation. Goodbye.